Hello, Zombie Freak 21, and I want to talk about the near end of television. The reason I'm discussing about this subject is, well, let's face it, TV is pretty much dying because, for one, there's really nothing on, especially considering now that we have over 200 channels or not more if you own a satellite dish, and yet there's still nothing on. Why? Simple. It's because 95% of television contains nothing but bullshit reality TV. And 5% of it, there's some good shows, but these shows aren't going to last because some of them are about to get canceled. But going through all this, it's just kind of sad. And this makes you really hate that I was born in 1989 because I only experienced half of what was good on TV for only in the 90s era, and some of it a little bit around the early 2000s. But let's get to the prime source. What I miss about television's TV standards back in the 20th century, there was these family related shows like Family Matters, Full House, and Step by Step. Because what I liked about the shows, it was more about basically talking to that person if they ever need you in some sort of support. And it's like, and mostly positive values on parents getting involved with their children's lives. And also, what I also miss about TV is, instead of trying to get this whole boyfriend-girlfriend thing, television back then, of course, was more about friendship. Because no matter what the situation is, the friend will always will always stick by your side. And yes, I know that some shows, they do, one person does end up falling in love with that other person, one another, but the only difference is they never escalate that far. But shitty shows such as Hannah Montana, Wizard of Waverly Place, it doesn't really have that kind of material. It's just more about just getting the stuff that you want and not regretting the consequences. And the type of real shows that were more about friendship was, of course, Salute Your Shorts, Wild Thornberrys, The Rugrats, The Adventures of Pete and Pete, and there's the Alex Mack. I could go on because there were so many good shows back then. And it's kind of sad because I did manage to watch some of the old shows from the 80s, which was the era that my mom had grew up in because she was a teenager at the time. And I never quite understood why she doesn't like 21 Jump Street. I know everybody has the right to state their own opinion, but I just don't see how she hates the show so much. But that's beside the point. Because, of course, 21 Jump Street, it was more about friendship, but it kind of goes into, but it was more hardcore. It goes into real life situations when it comes to drugs, STDs, HIV, bullying, and there's the gay, as well as the gay rights. But it seems now it's just way too out of the open. And look, it's fine. There's because I have nothing against gays. Because hell, I was in a group called the Gay Straight Alliance. But it seems to the point where they make most of these shows. They make the gay community look, I don't know. They make them look stupid. I don't know why, but it just, I really don't know how to describe this, but let me just get to the point of the video. And the other shows that came around the 80s and the early 90s, there was Dinosaur. Actually, that's kind of it. There are some other shows I can think of off the top of the head that came out in the 80s, but again, as I said, I hate that I was born in 1989 because only got that much, didn't get that much exposure. But don't get me wrong, the 90s, of course, was the last good era of television, because there were some good shows I grew up with, such as Rocko's Modern Life. I already mentioned the Wild Thornberrys and Rugrats. There's As Told by Ginger, but that was around the 2000s. Because again, there was some good stuff in the early 2000s. And speaking of the 2000 era, of course, that was around where television started going downhill. But don't get me wrong, there was a few good stuff. And the last good show of Nickelodeon was Avatar, The Last Airbender. So really, after that show had ended, Nickelodeon really went down the shitter, because that was really what was keeping Nickelodeon alive. But because of the departure of the show, it's just not the same. But let's face it, as I said, of course, all this is to blame on is MTV, since they're the ones who started this reality television crap. And it didn't take long for the other stations to copy it. Because now you have these shitty shows about teenagers who are rich and basically acts like a bunch of annoying, obnoxious, spoiled brats. And now teen pregnancy is on the rise thanks to shitty shows such as 16 and Pregnant and Teen Mom. Which I'll get a separate video on this one, because there's been rumor has it that the show's being investigated. Then there's the show where they teach kids not to be themselves. iCarly and Maid is a prime example. It seems now television is the turning point where it's dumbing down this coming generation. And I'm talking about those who were born in the late 90s, around the early 2000s. And honestly, it's just a shame that they're teaching the new generation how to ally stupidity. Because what I miss about the last part of the 20th century era is that there's a lot of stuff to do. And television, of course, it used to be positive, but now it's just turning negative. Ever since these events have happened, it was the turning point where I pretty much given up on TV altogether. I only watch it 5% of the time, because the few good shows that's still going strong is Law & Order SVU, Criminal Minds, there's CSI Miami and New York, and the list goes on. And of course there's The Walking Dead. And there was Early Heroes, but I'll get to a separate video on that one as well, on the rise and fall of that show. So I'm no psychic and I don't predict the future, but I will say this. Probably when we reach in around, let's say, the year 2030 or 2040, I think that's when we're finally able to get rid of television for good and just rely on the internet. Because let's face it, for me, the internet's pretty much my TV now. Because that's where I go on just to catch up on some good shows, on the classics once in a while. Basically, it's my way of avoiding all the reality crap. But I will say this, the only reality shows that are worth watching is of course, Mythbusters and Dirty Jobs. And that's pretty much it. Those are the only type of reality shows I watch. The only difference with those shows, it's more educational. And you actually learn something out of it. That's all I pretty much have to say about this. So add me on Facebook and Twitter if you want to get into more info on the issues going on, because I could always share info on certain events evolving around the today's culture. Well, I'm ZombieFreak21, and I'll see you next time.